Hey guys, Dillysaurus here, and today we're going to come back at you with another build to a new Demon Hunter, and it's going to be for Shadow 6 piece, and the spec is Lightning, so this is the S6 Lightning DH. So we'll go ahead and jump into it, and we'll get right to skills. So for our primary, our generator, we're going to be using Bola. And keep in mind, out of the 5 available primary generators, only 2 apply, Bola and Grenade. Bola is the ideal choice with Thunderball because it does generate the 7 hatred. It's lightning, so a little bit more damage. The AoE is also larger, and the cast animation is a tiny bit quicker than Grenades. So for these reasons, we're going to go ahead and stick with Bola and not even look at our Grenade counterpart. The secondary is going to be Impale, and a lot of the skills and why we picked the certain runes are going to be covered mostly in the gear and the explanation of the new Shadow 6 piece set. So if you have any questions about those, just hold in for a little bit, and hopefully those will be covered in the next 10 minutes or so. So our secondary is going to be Impale. And with Impale, there's a couple good runes, but since we're doing Lightning, we're going to be going with Ricochet. Ricochet makes it so when our Impale hits, it's going to hit 2 additional nearby enemies within 20 yards of each other. So it's just going to do our initial hit and then hit 2 more targets. The only other rune that I see worth it for S6 is Grievous Wounds, but sadly right now Grievous Wounds is bugged and we're not receiving the rune effect of gaining the crit hit damage. So hopefully when this goes live, Grievous Wounds will be applicable, but for right now, Ricochet is the way to go. So for our skills and abilities, we're going to go with Vault. Vault is always a great choice, and with this build, it's even better. There's a few runes for Vault, but we're going to go with a Rattling Roll. The only other one that with this spec would be worth it, with it being Lightning, would be Tumble, but we have a piece of gear that takes care of our discipline costs, so we're just going to stick with Rattling Roll. So our next is going to be Shadow Power, and with the S6, this is a huge part of the build, so you can see I have no rune chosen, and the reason I have no rune chosen is the Shadow 6 piece, one of the, specifically the 4 piece, will take care of our concern as to why I'm not using a rune. So we'll be getting our runes, so don't worry about it. Basically, I'd say whatever rune you pick is going to be for your style of what wings you want. I really like the red and black, so that's why I have that. So that's all we need to go over that for now. We'll touch up again on this in a bit. So our third will be Fan of Knives. Fan of Knives is really important to this build, and out of all the Fan of Knives, the only one that is viable for this build is Pinpoint Accuracy. Normal Fan of Knives is 620%. Pinpoint Accuracy is making it 1600%, so Pinpoint increases the damage and the cooldown of Fan of Knives, so that's what we're going to be going with. And then our fourth is Vengeance, and we're going to be going with C. So Vengeance, now from before, it's gaining 40% increased damage, so huge damage upgrade on Vengeance. We're going with Seethe because you gain 10 hatred per second, and just like I said before with Bolo giving us 7, we just want a lot of hatred because this build is pretty dependent on how much hatred you have to make sure it's efficient. The only other rune we could be looking at is Dark Heart, and that Dark Heart rune makes it so while Vengeance is active, it reduces all damage taken by 50%. So this rune is also nice, but we'll be explaining why we're going with Seethe later on. So that's our skills. So now for our passives. Awareness, get that. You're dead, but you're not dead. So important to have awareness. Cull the Weak. we need to have for the extra damage, 20% on slowed or chilled enemies. And this works hand in hand with our Thrill of the Hunt, and our Hatred Spenders slow enemies hit by 80% for 2 seconds. So each time an Impale hits, that's reducing their speed by 80%. That procs our Cull of the Weak, and that just works hand in hand. So these two really work well together. And our fourth is Ambush, and that's just dealing the 40% additional damage to enemies above 75 health. So our initial burst on a target is going to be really high. The only other passive that I view that's really worth it is Perfectionist. And while you could get this or one of these other skills with a Hellfire Amulet, I don't think it's worth it. I'll go a little bit more in depth into that when we get over to the gear here in a moment. So, Awareness, Cull of the Weak, Ambush, and Thrill of the Hunt are our passives. So that covers it for the build itself. So let's get over to the Shadow6 set pieces and what has changed with them and why we're using some of the things we're using. So the new 2 set is while equipped with a melee weapon, which we have, it increases your damage by 600%. So huge damage buff for using a melee weapon. That's what the Shadow set is all about, is a melee weapon. So our 4 set is Shadow Power gains the effect of every rune and lasts forever. So like I said before, it's just style of what wings you want. Shadow Power is active. As soon as you cast it, it's constantly up. You do have to refresh when you go in rifts and greater rifts, but it's up 100%. So there are a few changes to Shadow Power we can go over real quick. Is the normal no rune is just you gain 26,821 life per hit for 5 seconds. And your life per hit gained is increased by 25% of your life per kill. So life per kill on gear, it's nice. It's not needed though, but nice little bonus. So first rune, slow the movement speed of enemies within 30 yards by 80% for 5 seconds. So that helps our Cull of the Weak proc. That makes us slow everything. It makes kiting and CC a little bit more efficient. Blood Moon is double the total amount of life per hit gained. So from 26,821, we're going up to 53,642 off the top of my head. Oh yeah. So Blood Moon, really nice. Well of Darkness reduces the cost to 8 discipline. That's not that great. It just makes it so the initial cast of Shadow Power will be cheaper. So not that great, but still useful. Gloom makes it so 35% damage reduction while Shadow Power is active. So we're taking 35% less damage, and Shadow Glide makes it so our movement speed is increased by 30% while Shadow Power is active. So that means the entire time our Shadow Power is active, since it's constantly up, we're gaining 53,642 life per hit. We have an aura that makes it so all enemies within 30 yards are moving 80% slower for 5 seconds. We have our Gloom, which is reducing our damage taken by 35%, and we're getting a 30% increased movement speed while Shadow Power is active. So, pretty nice 4-piece. And the new, with the new gear, 6-piece is Impale deals an additional 40,000% weapon damage to the first enemy hit. So that's why we're using Impale. 40,000 damage. So it makes it so our first hit on Impale does a ton of damage. Like I said, Grievous Wounds will be nice in the future if it's fixed, but right now it is bugged, so we're using that Ricochet. So that's the new 6-piece of Shadow. So let's go over the gear. You're going to see a couple new items, and we'll get to them right now. So our first is going to be Lord Greenstone's Fan. So Lord Greenstone's Fan gets us our melee weapon for our 2 set of Shadow, and its secondary is every second gain 100% increased damage for your next fan of knives. That stacks up to 30 times. So the damage range is 80 to 100%. So it stacks up to 30 times. So think of that. 30 times, that's this right here. And for each stack, that's 100%. So our fan of knives, what we did is we did the increased cooldown but increased damage. So our fan of knives are hitting super hard. You'll see that later on in the Rift video of how hard that's really hitting. So huge damage, it's insane. You'll love to see it. Our rings are going to be focus and restraint. Um, on one of our rings, we do have the cooldown, and we have cooldown a couple other pieces of gear. We'll go over why we're doing that, but besides that, you just want damage. I'd love for the dex on my restraint to be average damage, but it's still basically work with what you got, and that's fine. Gloves, you want dex, fight, crit damage, crit chance, standard gloves. Our shoulders are dex, fight, all resist, cooldown reduction. So that's that cooldown reduction I was talking about. You could have the all resist swap over to to area damage, but I'm going a little bit more safe and sticking with the all resist. Your helm is dex, fight, crit chance. You can go with impale damage, but I like to be, like I said, a little more tanky because this build is a little bit more susceptible to damage than the other builds. So I'm going to go with a little more toughness. Our amulet is Hauntavaxo. This is exactly how you want it rolled. You want the lightning, crit damage, crit chance, and the socket. It's perfect. There's a few viable choices for for your amulet. I use Hauntavaxo because you summon your shadow clones whenever you stun, and like I said before, rattling roll when you roll through, and when you're rolling and where you land, it knocks back enemies and they're stunned. So that procs our Hauntavaxo. And what happens is your two clones are summoned. The two clones cast multi-shot, entangling shot, which is nice for the slow. But they also cast Mark for Death, and the Mark for Death they cast is actually the Valley of Death. So Mark for Death normally is 20% additional damage for 30 seconds. The Mark for Death Valley of Death is an extra 15% additional damage. And it's in a circle basically on the ground. You'll see it as we're going through the rift. So anything that's in that circle is taking 35% extra damage. So not only is that nice for the entangling shot, for the slow, for the damage, but it's also a couple more bodies. These shadow clones can't die. I mean, they have trillions of health. Mobs aren't going to be able to kill them, so it's basically 2 extra tanks up. And this effect occurs once every 30 seconds. It's going to be up a lot of the rift, so they're up for 15 seconds, and then there's a 15-second cooldown. So you can also use an Eye of Etlich. Eye of Etlich is giving you the huge damage reduction, so that's a very viable amulet. You can also use a Hellfire amulet. Hellfire amulet can get you the extra passive. Perfectionist, Leech, Numbing Traps, Single Out. Those are pretty much the only skills I'd really view worth it. But again, if you get something that's worth it, as long as you just have a nice Eye of Etlich, Hellfire amulet, or Hauntavaxo, it's to each their own how they want to play this spec a little differently. Our Raps of Clarity, lightning, elemental damage, dex fight, crit chance. Standard Raps of Clarity. Obviously, secondary you want as high to 35% as possible. Our chess piece is just dex fight, all resist. I'd love to have the secondary have a damage reduction, but again, work with what you got. Our pants are dex fight, all resist. Basically perfect pants. You could get your secondary with a slow on hit, but no biggie. Our boots are dex fight, movement speed, impale damage. So impale damage really important. I'd like the movement speed to be all resist, but again, you work with what you got. So the two last pieces that I skipped over so I could explain them a little bit more in depth is first is the Chain of Shadows, which is new, and standard belt primary wise, you just want your as high dex as you can, and then you just want your defensives. I'd rather have all resist instead of armor, but it's perfectly fine. The secondary is after using Impale, Vault costs no resource for 2 seconds. So what that means is that after I Impale throw, I have 2 seconds where Vault costs absolutely nothing. And as you can see, that little buff right down here. So it tells you how long you have to Vault, seeing as it costs no discipline. That also really helps with the rattling roll, which you'd think, oh, that's a lot of discipline, but that's why we don't need to be using tumble for that. So we have infinite vaults as long as you're throwing an impale every 2 seconds. And our last piece, which is the highly and frequently asked question, is why do Shadow, Mantle, Demon Hunters, so S6, why do they use Bombardier's Rucksack? Well, there's 3 viable quivers for that. There's Bombardier's Rucksack, Dead Man's Legacy, and Sin Seekers. So what happened is with Bombardiers and with the other 2, they changed it so they naturally roll on 1 extra affix. And so for Bombardiers, it naturally rolls on sentry damage. Now, I rolled the sentry damage off, and I got cooldown from it. And area damage is really nice for this spec, so I had the natural rolled area damage, and then I rolled the sentry to cooldown. So that basically gives me a quiver that has an additional affix, versus to using maybe another quiver. So it's really, really nice to be using our Bombardier's Rucksack. And like I said before, there's the other 2 quivers, and they do the same thing, where the Dead Man's Legacy gives the extra multi-shot double tap and the from 50% to 60%, but it rolls the multi-shot damage on. You can roll the multi-shot damage off. And then the Sin Seekers give the the rapid fire. It makes it so secondary is rapid fire doesn't cost any resource to channel. But it gives the rapid fire damage. You roll that rapid fire damage into your cooldown or your area damage just to make it a perfect quiver. So this, you get the 2 extra additional sentries. We don't use that, but the reason, as I explained, is you get the extra fix and you just roll that into what you want. The reason it's cooldown, and like I was saying before, on our ring and our shoulders, is you want 37% cooldown reduction. And we have 38.67, so we're fine. But the best places to get that are on your shoulders, your ring, your quiver, your weapon, and your amulet. Now, amulet isn't a good choice because you're either going to lose 20 elemental damage, you're going to lose a socket, you're going to lose crit damage, or you're going to lose crit chance. It's just, it's not worth it to get it on that spot. For a weapon, we'd have to either lose dex, our percent damage, or our area damage. Area damage we could lose for crit for our cooldown reduction, but I'd much rather have our area damage on our weapon, or even maybe you could have Vite, or you could have attack speed. It's just those are better suited stats for that. Whereas our quiver, we get our cooldown from there. We could get 15% damage on Impale, but it's a lot better to be keeping your 3 cooldown reductions to your ring, quiver, and shoulder, because those are the spots where you lose the less overall. So that's what we did. We got our cooldown reduction on our shoulder, our ring, and our quiver. So those are our 3 spots. So that kind of goes the overview of the gear and why, with these new items, what we're using them for. So let's go ahead and look over at our gems. So our first gem is Esoteric Alteration. Esoteric, you gain 53% non-physical damage reduction. It's going to be different based off your rank, but you're gaining non-physical damage reduction. So that's cold, fire, lightning, poison, arcane, holy, all the elements. You're gaining damage reduction to that. Keep in mind, arcane is holy, so it's the same thing, but just so you know, you're gaining just physical you're getting non-physical damage reduction, so to all those elements. And then the secondary, while below half life, your resistances to cold, fire, lightning, poison, and arcane are increased by 75%. So at half health, you gain a huge amount of toughness from basically getting 75% of your overall resist, depending on which resist it is. So huge, huge toughness bonus right there. Our second is Bane of the Trapped. Bane of the Trapped, huge damage based off rank, but again, it's just a huge amount of damage. So that's going to be for our slowed, and like I said before, we have Thrill of the Hunt, which slows things. Our clones Entangling Shot, when we're near things, we're slowing them, so we have the slow controlled. So just damage off our Bane of the Trapped. And then our third is Taeguk. Taeguk is huge damage. It's based off of, whatever your rank is, you get how many stacks, and for each stack, you're getting 0.5 increased damage. So that's huge offensively. And the secondary, as soon as you hit rank 25, you're getting that 0.5 armor stack. So for every stack you're getting 0.5 damage and 0.5 armor. And although we are Dex class, you would think armor DR is pretty hard, but the damage numbers and the toughness numbers, they're pretty significant. So that's our gem overview. Our next piece we're going to be looking at is our cube. And like I said before, you want 37% cooldown reduction, and that is because of our 100% uptime of Vengeance. And the way we achieve 100% uptime of Vengeance is with our 37%. You can have a little bit less, and like I have a little bit more, it's fine. As long as you have close to 37%, you're going to have almost or 100% Vengeance. And with our Vengeance, gaining that 40% additional damage, and the Dawn is what helps us achieve that. It reduces the cooldown of Vengeance by 65%. So having that 100% uptime of Vengeance means the whole Rift, you have that increased damage, you have that 10 extra hatred. And then with the armor slot we're using is Visage of Goons, Vengeance gains the effect of the Dark Heart rune. So like I said before, Dark Heart was the only other viable choice, and we get it with our cube, and that is, it reduces all damage taken by 50%. So Vengeance is up 100% of the time. That means you're getting your 10 hatred per second, you're getting your 40% increased damage, you're getting your 50% damage reduction. So pretty amazing. The damage from the rockets, I mean, that's even an added bonus off of Vengeance. Our jewelry / trinket slot is going to be Convention of the Elements. You just want to line up your lightning. It's just like any other build. You're just lining up all your damage on your lightning as best you can. In the video, we'll cover a little bit more of how you do the damage with our S6 build. So that's our gear, our gems, what we're using in the cube, and lastly, we'll go over Paragon. Core, you want your movement speed. I got the 12% on boots, so I have 13% here. As long as you have 25% base movement speed, you're good. Next is maximum hatred max, and then everything into dex. Our offense is going to go cooldown reduction, crit damage, crit chance, then attack speed. Our defense is going to be all resist, life, armor, life regeneration, and our utility is resource cost reduction, area damage, life on hit, and then good old useless gold find. So that's it for the build, what you put into it, what the gear you use, and our skills. And we'll scoot over to the next video, and that'll be going through Greater Rift, and we'll do some explanation of how the build works. So let's go ahead and head over to that. Alright, so here's some gameplay, guys. So as soon as you get into the Rift, you want to make sure you get your Shadow Power active, and then after that, the quickest way about getting around is by throwing an Impale and just moving. And with Shadow6 set, how you want to play is you want to group everything. You want to get big, fat groups as much as possible. And you see, like, I'm going to be taking damage at the beginning, but you just got to keep building up your Taeguk. You want to just keep being mobile. You don't want to stay in one spot too much. Because as long as you're moving around, you actually don't take that much damage. You'll take a little fix, maybe a couple of ranged hits, but as long as you're just really mobile and you just continue grouping, you're going to be fine. Now, the way that your damage works is that your Impale is doing a decent amount of damage, but as you can see, it's going to be a lot more suited towards your single target. So like when I'm attacking one target and I can efficiently attack one target. When I get the big groups, you want to be fan-kniving them down. And the way you work it is you work completely off your Convention of Elements. Like, you never fan-knives unless your Convention of Elements is up and your lightning procced. So the difference between a lot of other builds is that you can be kiting and grouping the entire time, even when your lightning is procced. It's just when your lightning is procced, you want to make sure your fan of knives is going to be worth shooting off. So when it's in that big group, you want to make sure your stacks are all, as high as you can get them. And then on top of them being as high as you can get them, you want to make sure that it's on your lightning proc phase before you fan of knives. And it does a ton of damage. You'll see me just clear waves really quickly. Like right here, we have our fire proc. it goes into lightning, and you just clear waves. So it's really important you make sure you're Fan-O-Knivesing on your lightning. The other thing is, I know some people, they like to hold it to 30 stacks. And basically how it's going to work is with the cooldown we have, your Fan-O-Knives will be up every single lightning rotation, and then on top of it being up every single lightning rotation, you're going to want to make sure that it gets used. You don't want to keep it to 30 stacks. Like, that's a common misconception about this. You want to make sure that when it's on lightning, you try to use it at the last moment so you can get those last extra stacks in, but you don't want to hold on to it. The only times you want to hold on to it is in a little bit later in this video. You'll see where we actually want to hold on to it and not waste it. But it doesn't matter as long as you're using your stacks efficiently and not letting them pool just to do bigger damage, because, you know, more stacks, more damage. That's not how it works. So just make sure you're just dropping your Fan-O-Knives on your lightning proc. Make sure you have your focus and restraint up, but you can kite the entire time. So just make sure you're just on top of that. That's the most important part. So right here we are going to encounter a double pack, and I mean, it's a 75, it's no joke, but the great thing about S6 is that as long as you just see where you're moving as you're going through, and you're keeping everything grouped together for the most part, just constantly moving, you have your high mobility, you're stunning as you're moving. It's amazing at staying alive and killing the group at the same time. I mean, most classes would be really hesitant to take on a double pack, especially with Mallet Lords being in the mix. But as long as you're just moving, you're making sure that your movements aren't going into a Mallet Lord swing or into, like, you know, a frozen like this group has. As long as you just are really aware of your surroundings, you can really just take these groups out quickly. I mean, the Elite's already dead, the Mallet Lords are already basically dead, and it's really not that bad. I mean, that's the great thing about S6. So right here will be the last stop before we hit the Rift Guardian. And something I want to go over here is proper use of Fan-O-Kniving. So before I was explaining how you pull your Fan-O-Knives, you only use it on your lightning proc, make sure you're grouping, make sure your FNR is up. You just want to make sure that everything damage-wise is all lined up. But one thing you also don't want to do is waste your Fan-O-Knives. So like I said before, I said you don't want to be using your Fan-O-Knives outside of your lightning proc. The other thing you don't want to do is, like, for right now there's one champion, and I had my Fan-O-Knives proc ready before, but it's only one champion. There's no point in using it there. That's just completely wasting our Fan-O-Knives proc. So you want to make sure that there's at least a group. On single target, Impale is going to do far more damage consistently, so all you want to do for groups like that champion pack is that when it's down to one guy, you just want to impale him. You don't want to waste your convention of element and your Fan-O-Knives rotation on single target Fan-O-Knives. You can do that on Greater Rift Guardian, and that's what we'll jump to right now. So next up we'll be having the Rift Guardian. Rift Guardians are really quick kills with S6. You'll see that as we get to her. The Binder, she has her spit, she has her minions she can summon, she has her little poison that she shoots out. She's not too bad as long as you just stay mobile, and that's key on Rift Guardians. Just stay mobile as S6. I stayed really high on my Hatred. Usually you should be constantly pretty much depleted on your Hatred. You want to pull a little bit for your Lightning for the extra damage, but that's pretty much it. Like I was saying before, you always want to hold your Fan-O-Knives, and you don't want to waste, but on Rift Guardians, it's just when your Lightning proc comes up, you use it on the Rift Guardian. You can always hold on to it a little bit, but single target, it's fine. It's just an extra, it doesn't slow your global cooldown. It's not like you can't be impaling while you're Fan-O-Knivesing, so it's perfectly fine to use it single target here. So use it when it's up, as long as it's on Lightning, just don't waste it. But that's pretty much it. So, could have been a quicker kill. It was only a minute. Could have been even quicker, but I was playing a little safe. So, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If there's any questions or comments you have, please go ahead and leave that at the bottom in the comments section. I'll be doing M6 guide next. And if you're interested in more guides, go ahead and give the channel a sub. But thanks for watching, and until next time, guys, have a good one.